we're working with the 5-section brocade. I have at times also referred to this work as the 5 words brocade, and actually both are appropriate. So it's a 5-section brocade because there's 5 distinct parts to it. There's 5 distinct sections, and these are sometimes known as brocades in the Qigong or Neigong world. So what do I mean by brocades? If you looked at a piece of woven fabric, a quilt is a good example. The quilt may not just be one uniform woven piece. It might be several woven pieces that have been stitched together. So this idea of the brocade comes from this idea that you have one brocade and then it's stitched with another and another and another. So this is very old sort of jargon for this kind of practice. So in traditional Chinese martial arts, we often hear about the 8 brocades. That's found in traditional martial arts, traditional Neigong, traditional Qigong, the 8 brocades. So for example, the Baduan Jin. And these practices are very, very famous. Some of them are practiced universally around the world. There's a standardized Baduan Jin. You know, the one that's got the drawing the bow exercises in it. That one is very famous. So for the 5-section program, the 5-section Taiji Chuan program, I felt it would be useful to have a component of the program that essentially accomplished the same things that the Baduan Jin is meant to accomplish. So we've got Baduan Jin means 8 brocade practice. So we're doing the 8 brocade or 8-section brocade practice is called Baduan Jin, and we're calling this Wuduan Jin or 5-section brocade. So the name 5-section brocade comes from this idea, the idea of the Baduan Jin and also the fact that we're practicing in the context of 5-section Taiji. Now, creating this work gave me the opportunity to put it together in any way that I saw fit. So my goal was not to exactly replicate or mimic the Baduan Jin, but to create something or develop something that had very similar components, very similar capabilities in terms of benefiting the practitioner, but also that served the program, served the 5-section Taiji program. So this is then based on the core principles concepts. The core principles concepts are what we could call an embodiment of natural laws. There's certain ways that things work and must work, and we want to embody those in our Tai Chi practice. And these come at different levels. One of the levels, the first level, is the level of what we could call self-composure. What do I mean by self-composure? Well, when we start to learn Tai Chi, when we start to do a Tai Chi class and we're standing there, we've come in from wherever we've come in from our jobs, from our work, from traffic, from the busy world. And we've come in packing with us all of that energy. And when we're in Tai Chi class, we want to move past that. So the first thing is to establish some degree of self-composure, to compose one's energies, to bring them together in a way that we can now better do our Tai Chi practice so that it benefits us more efficiently. So the material that brings us into self-composure are what we call the 5 words of self-composure. When we're working with the 5 words of self-composure, we're working with that first stage of core principles, which is self-composure. The second stage of core principles has to do with body structure and alignment, how we hold ourselves, and how we arrange our physicality. So body structure looks at things like the fact that the shoulder is a ball and socket joint and the elbow is a hinge joint. That's about body structure. And then alignment has to do with how we arrange these elements so that, for example, the armpit, the elbow, and the sitting wrist connect. So you can see there already we're in the realm of what we might call core principles in the sort of conventional sense, and also in the Chan Tzu Gong. So the second level of core principles is body structure and alignment. The third level is to do with stances and transitions, how we stand and how we move between stances. That's also covered in core principles work. And these 3 aspects, the self-composure aspect, the body structure aspect, and the stances, these things are all dealt with in the 5-section brocade, or the 5 words brocade. There's 2 other aspects to core principles as well. One is the solo sequences, and the other is the partner sequences. So what we could say here is the sequences, the routines. So that is the 5-section solo form, the 5-section 2-person form, the sword solo, 5-section sword form solo, 5-section partner sword routine, and the Chen. So those are all routines. And then also partner, so that includes the solo and partner sequences. And then the 5th component to core principles training has to do with partner connection. So all of these are what is meant by core principles. And the first 3 categories are studied and worked with in the 5-section brocade. So there's a little context for that for you. In the next handout, maybe I will put some of that material together, like how does the core principles relate to this. As I said, if you want to do a deep dive, as people like to say these days, it's a very common expression now, doing a deep dive. But if you want to do a deep dive into core principles, the work that's presented in the core principles level 1 and level 2 can be really helpful. So I can direct your attention over to the website for that. Now, when we're talking about this first level of core principles, self-composure, the way we work with that is through the 5 words of self-composure. And I realize that a lot of you will already know this material because it's quite fundamental in my teaching. But I'm going to review it so that we can be fairly thorough about it, and so that we can have a basis for any questions that you might have, and also to cover things that you may have missed. If you missed part of these ideas, by covering it this way again, we'll hopefully give you some material that you hadn't considered before. So only to say, sorry if this feels repetitive, if you've worked on this material before, and we're starting with this. So I hope you don't get the feeling of, oh yeah, here he goes again on the core principles. So the 5 words. The first thing we'll say about the 5 words is that the sequence of the 5 words is very important. I can't really emphasize that enough. The sequence of the 5 words is like many things in life. The sequence in which we do things is important. We can get a completely different result depending on the way we go about things in terms of sequencing them. And the 5 words, for example, none of them are unique. They're not particularly creative. Breath, calm, center, root, energy. Any internal art of any type will use these words. There is no yoga class, for example, or meditation class that will not encourage the practitioners to do something with their breath. Breath is fundamental to it. Being calm is almost the reason for practicing many of these arts, so that's nothing unique, that's nothing new. Center, to be centered, well, certainly any Tai Chi class, that's going to be a big theme. Find your center, move from the center. These are important core Tai Chi concepts. And so center is not some big revelation. And root, that's a very Tai Chi concept. You may go to a yoga class and have them talk about root, but it seems to be quite important for Tai Chi people, and it's often emphasized. So where are we at now? Breath, calm, center, root. And then finally, energy or movement. So the idea of energy or moving energetically, these are, again, they're not new concepts. If you went to study Feldenkrais or, like I say, yoga, or anything to do with conscious body movement, energy would likely come into it. So there's nothing particularly new, interesting, or creative about any of the 5 words of self-composure. The only thing is the sequence. That's something that's very important and is really emphasized in the 5-section program. Let me just say something about the 5-section program in brief too, to put that in even a greater context. The purpose of the 5-section program is twofold. One is it's designed to provide a foundation for the study of traditional Tai Chi. What do I mean by that? So I have this little poster here. Some of you have probably seen this. It's called the Full Curriculum Library. And what it is a look at the Masich Internal Arts program. And you can see that the first part of the program is, that's the last part. First part of the program is the 5-section Tai Chi program. And you can see that it's broken into an outer layer, an inner layer, and a deep layer. From there, in my program, one would go on to the foundational curriculum of the Yang Style Tai Chi Chuan full curriculum program. So we'd start with foundational curriculum, then we'd get into bare hand curriculum, and this is very traditional apparatus curriculum or weapons, the Tai Chi weapons, and then we'd do some auxiliary studies. And then from there, in my program, as another wing, we would study the other internal arts of Xingyi and Bagua, and we'd study those in the context of the Yang Style program. So what's the idea here is, first of all, to have a preparation, then to study the core of the program, and from there to extend it out. So you could think of it like preparation is one of the wings, and then Yang Style Tai Chi full curriculum is the main body, and then the Xingyi Bagua program or other internal arts program is the other wing. So the entire thing is comprised of a lot of components. And if we go, let's say we get up to here. This is a little tricky to do. Here we are. So here's the 5-section program, deep layer. You can see that we've got the bare hand forms, the sword forms, things to do with connection, and then things to do with core principle or intensive training and intensive training. So in this little blue column, the core principles, we see 5 words of self-composure, and we see the Wuduan Jin, or the 5-section brocade. Do you see that there? So if we're looking at this material in context in my program, that's how it's functioning, the 5-section brocade. It's nestled in to the 5-section program as a deeper layer practice, as a way of studying core principles. And we see there from that diagram that the 5 words of self-composure and the 5-section brocade are really part of a single study. So they go together. Now, the other way of looking at the 5-section program is that it's a standalone program. So my intention in developing the 5-section program is twofold. One is, as I just clarified, that it is preparation for a much larger traditional program. And that's the first purpose of it. That was my first intention in developing the work. The other thing, though, is to provide students who are curious about Tai Chi, who want to get to know Tai Chi, with a very solid program that gives them a more or less complete experience of the art. So it gives them the solo practice, it gives them some partner practice, and it gives them some work with one of the apparatus or weapons, in this case the sword. Of course, there's much more involved solo forms in traditional Tai Chi. The partner work is very, very involved in traditional Tai Chi, and there's many weapons studies as well. So you could see the 5-section program as a bit of a synopsis that gives somebody a bit of a flavor for an entire traditional program, you know, without needing to put in the 8 years or so to study it. So one who is a student who's quite dedicated and enthusiastic in the right conditions with classroom time can learn the full 5-section program in about a year and a half. It's not that onerous. Even a year, depending on how it's approached. If a person is coming to a lot of workshops or things like that, they can even learn the contents of it in a year. But the traditional, you need 7, 8 years of pretty concerted study to get through it. So that's the other purpose of the 5-section program, is that it can be there as a standalone program for people who want to do Tai Chi. They want to do it fairly deeply, but they don't necessarily want to make the full commitment and investment into a full traditional, full curriculum program, because that is it's pretty heavy, you know. 8 years to get through it is a fair bit. Now, I'm teaching this class on 5-section brocade, and I'm teaching it in that twofold way. I'm teaching it as Sam Masich, the person who has the Masich Internal Arts Method, and from that perspective, I'm teaching you the 5-section brocade as I would teach it to prepare somebody for my full program. The other hat that I have on is Sam Masich, who created the 5-section program and just wants people to be competent and able to do that. So I'm kind of going back and forth between those two motivations while I'm teaching here. So for some of you, it might feel like, oops, we're getting way down the rabbit hole here. The reason, if I go down the rabbit hole, the reason for that is because I've got that first hat on, that we're preparing for a much bigger, longer journey. But for the most part, what I want to accomplish in this class is getting through the brocades so that we can get to practicing them and use them in our daily Tai Chi practice. So, back to the 5 words of self-composure. I had mentioned they are breath, calm, center, root, and energy, and I had commented that the sequence is important. Why is the sequence important? The sequence is important because it's really not possible just to leap into those later words credibly without preparation. I'll give an example of what I mean. So the student comes into the class and is waiting on the teacher's instruction, and the teacher says, okay, be centered. Center yourself. You're kind of looking around, looking at the other students, seeing what they're doing. Is this it? Is this centering? Or the teacher says, find your root. And you're going, I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what that is. It's very difficult to leap into centering or root or energy, feel your energy, just cold. It's even difficult to go straight to calm. Like if somebody's upset and you have the impulse to say, calm down, calm down. That can actually be more agitating to a person. If you're in a bit of a state and somebody says, calm down, you almost feel like you're having something imposed on you. How am I supposed to calm down when I'm upset? Well, just calm down. Well, how do I do that? So the idea here is that each word leads to the next. This is the important concept. As I say, I know some of you are already familiar with this idea, but I think it's very, very important not only to know that in this practice, but to understand it as a general concept. When we're doing anything in life, we're moving. Somehow we're moving. If you're doing your dishes or your taxes, or if you're working on your computer, even sedentary activities like working on your computer involve movement. So anything you do involves movement, and the question is, what's the foundation of it? Of course, we can just move. We can sort of autocratically have the brain or the will tell the body to move, do this, do that, do this, do that. But part of the idea of the Tai Chi practice is to go beyond that, go beyond this sort of autocratic body-mind relationship. When I say autocratic, I mean that the mind is the boss, that the will is the boss, and the body is the servant. And the body must do what the mind tells it to for the purposes of the mind. That's what I mean by autocratic. We have to, in a sense, take into account, in the Tai Chi way of looking at things, we need to also take into account the needs of the body. We also need to take into account what the body is contributing to the situation in terms of information. It's not just the mind running around saying, do this, do that, do this, do that, and the body going, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, right? So if we want a different kind of relationship internally, and I would argue a different kind of relationship between people based on that, then we have to go about this in a different way. So we can't just say, be calm, or center, or root, or even move. Do you see what I mean? So I wake up in the morning, my mind is preoccupied with my list of things to do that day. Maybe I write some of them down, and then I get busy. You know, I grab a quick breakfast, and then I jump in on my bike or in my car, and then I start running around doing my errands. At the end of the day, when I finally pay even a little bit of attention to the body, I go, whew. And that's when the body gets to speak. That's not brain speak. Whew. That's not the will, the mind, the ego speaking. That's the body finally getting to say something. So this is what I mean by an autocratic approach. I would even argue that we don't have a chance at breaking this on a social level, on an interpersonal level, on a global level, a national level, at the level of nations, if we can't even do it in ourselves. How can we have hundreds of millions or billions of people who are running around with an autocratic internal relationship all day come together in a democratic, egalitarian way and solve problems as a community? How do we approach that meaningfully? Because it's all well and good to say things about it, but we want a mind-body relationship. This is a body-mind practice. And that relationship starts with a very simple fusion of mind and body. Rather than starting with the will telling the body what to do, we start with paying attention to a body process that's already in play. And that is breath. We're already breathing. The question is, are we aware of the fact that we're breathing? Do we know that we're breathing? And of course, breath works on basically kind of two, we've got the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system have to do with unconscious, involuntary actions of the body and conscious, voluntary actions of the body. So the breath is taking place automatically. We don't need to attend to it. But if we just start paying attention to the breath, we start to sync up this body-mind thing that I'm talking about. So let's just try it as a little exercise right now. So this is a follow-along kind of exercise. We're going to take 3 breaths, and you just want them to be normal breaths and pay attention to them. So you're actually already breathing. So in a way, I don't even need to say take 3 breaths. What I really mean to say is pay attention to 3 breaths. So just start noticing them. And for some of you, your breath will be a little longer. For some of you, it will be shorter. If you do a full Taiji breath, it'll be very, very long. It'll be double the length of normal breathing. But we're just paying attention to breathing. Can you notice that something changes immediately just when you cast your attention to the breath? When I start paying attention to the breath, I'll just describe it from my end. As soon as I start paying attention to the breath itself changes. I start breathing differently. And the breath becomes a little smoother. It becomes probably a little longer, maybe a little deeper. And just the fact of paying attention to it makes me want to attend to the breath a little bit. Now, if we think of that sort of philosophically, this isn't me just using my will and ego to say to the breath, do this, do that. It's rather noticing the breath, paying attention to it, and the breath, as a consequence, changing a little bit. Like Albert Einstein is reputed to have said, observation alters behavior. A difficult problem for scientists is how to study the behavior of something because the very fact that they're observing it alters its behavior. And so we have that here, but it's a positive. We want to allow the behavior to become altered by the fact that we're observing it or paying attention to it. So conscious breath. Take another couple breaths, and as you're taking these breaths, I'm going to continue talking through the process. So same thing, breathe and pay attention to the breath. And do you notice that also as you pay attention to the breath, and the breath changes a little bit, that a sense of calm, a quality of calmness, also enters into the picture. Not because you're saying, be calm. I'm not going, Sam, calm down. Nothing like that. It's that as I pay attention to the breath, the mere paying attention to the breath causes calm to become a condition. Really, at this stage, what we want to do is just say yes to the emerging calm. We don't really need to do anything. We don't really have to amplify the calm. We just want to say yes to it. So just as we've attended to the breath, we've paid attention to the breath, and that's caused things to change, we want to pay attention to the calm, and we want to accept the calm, or let's say agree with the calm, or encourage the calm, let's say. It's not so much about giving an order, be calm, get calm, calm down. It's really about recognizing that quality and going along with it. So the mind is very involved in this process, but not in this, as I said before, autocratic way. The mind is a bit more diplomatic than autocratic. It's listening. It's finding agreement. When we become calm, essentially what is occurring is that tension, muscle tension, is let go. So we have tension that we hold in the body, and the way we hold that tension, the fact that we hold that tension, prevents us from moving freely or even standing clearly. What do I mean by that? Let's say I've got a lot of tension in the neck. So for example, many years ago, I had spinal neck surgeries. I'd had 2 ruptured discs in my neck, which actually caused paralysis in my arm, and I required spinal neck surgery. Spinal neck surgery is quite traumatizing. I'm using my own example here. This might be a little too revealing, but when they do the spinal neck surgery, they actually go in from the front here. So they actually have to cut through this material. So if I make a gesture like this, you can see there's nothing there on that side. So this surgery cut that area of my body. And that was in order to get at that was because when I was lying on my back in the surgery, it's easier for the surgeon who's right-handed to go through there and do the work. And so that's what allowed me to regain the use of my arm because it was paralyzed. This arm was paralyzed through the brachial nerve. It's not really important, my history there, only to make a point. 10 years later, I had a recurrence of that problem and needed 2 more surgeries. So it's quite invasive. And I say that not to say anything about me particularly, but to say something about all of us. We all have our little quirks. Some of us have had things like a surgery. Some people have fallen off a ladder. I know somebody that started Tai Chi because they were a painter, a house painter, and they fell off something like an 18-foot ladder and had all kind of parts of their body just shattered. And Tai Chi was part of their recovery. Later they became a Tai Chi teacher. You know, we have emotional stuff. Maybe we had a parent that was just always on us, or a teacher or something that would just berated us. So we've had all kind of accidents and insults to form, let's say, surgeries, abuses, all kind of things. This world can be quite tricky to navigate through. So how do we get at those things? How do we get at working at those things when they're so deep? Well, this process of breath, calm, center, root, if we're approaching things this way, this allows us to get at these things that normally would be holding tension, splinting, bracing, and essentially trying to prevent movement, prevent energy from entering in, because there's, let's say, a fear in the body. By partnering with the body, rather than autocratically bossing it around and telling it what to do all the time, by partnering with it through breath, calm, center, root, we have a possibility to address some of these things. And when we get to the level of calm, then muscles start to relax. And when muscles start to relax, we spontaneously find center in 2 ways. I'll describe these 2 kinds of center first and then describe a little bit how we get into them. The first center is our center line with gravity. Gravity is very vertical, but I might be leaning forward a little bit, or I might be even pulled back, or I just might have some parts of my body pitching forward while other ones are pulling back. But gravity is always the force coming directly down and through the body. So, or at least that's how we experience it. So when I begin to relax, when the body begins to relax, the muscles that hold me in these odd positions, these positions that are away from the line of gravity, those muscles start to relax. Now, if I have an extreme situation, here I'm holding a lot of tension in my butt, I've got tension in my lower back, up in my shoulders, in my neck, a lot of tension in my jaw. If I'm holding a lot of tension like that, and I truly just relax and let go, I would pitch forward. So I'm holding enough tension that when I let go of that tension, I'm actually off balance. The thing that's keeping me standing, the thing that's holding me up, is my tension. So, you know, we come to subconsciously trust that tension more than we trust our relationship with gravity. Then we tend to invest in the things that produce that tension that's holding us up. So on some level, no, we don't want to fall. And if we really relaxed our tension, then we would fall. So there's a tendency then to hold tension and even create reasons to hold that tension in order that we don't fall. I don't want to get too fancy or philosophical here, but we could maybe see this on some level as the original fall of mankind. Carl Jung described that apparently, that one of our great fears is the fear of falling. I would go even further than that, though. I would say it's not just a fear or an anxiety, it's a dread fear. On some level, we dread falling. Because what does falling mean? Well, these days in our sanitary homes with our well-controlled environments, not too much. Maybe if you fell, you might bump yourself on a table or something like that. But if we look at the majority of human history and we look at what falling down means we're the ultimate prey. That means that if I fall down, especially if I can't get up, then I'm prey to insects, I'm prey to birds, I'm prey to wandering animals with sharp teeth. And I would say that the deep, deep fear, the deep dread fear of falling has to do with the fear of being eaten, being eaten alive. I can't imagine a more horrific experience. And I think there's a dread fear in there that's tied into the fear of being devoured. So we would do anything to prevent ourselves from falling on some level. And that means we would hold all of these tensions that, were we to relax them, would cause us to pitch forward. So our behavior, the choices we make in life, may, from this perspective, have to do, even the sort of the dysfunctional things that we do, the things that we really, if we thought better of it, probably wouldn't choose to do, but we feel almost compelled to do them, compulsions, obsessions, things like that. They may have on this level to do with maintaining a certain tension structure, a tension structure which feels to us on some level vital in order to keep us standing and moving through the world. So this kind of survival anxiety, I think, can go very, very deep. And when we get to the place of calm, where the muscles are relaxing, this means that all that tension is let go, and we have really no choice but to somehow come back to center. So all of this tension that was pulling me off the line, when I relax it, I could either pitch forward or I could gradually adjust myself back to the line of gravity. And in so doing, find the second idea of centering, which is to bring ourselves down into the center of gravity of the body. So there's the line of gravity that's passing through the body, and we can center with that line. The other kind of centering, though, has to do with the center of gravity of the body, which is down near the middle of the body. This is another way of describing dantian. So the dantian is understood as the energetic center of the body in Taiji and in martial arts. And it's somehow back and in the center of the body, just around the navel height, a little bit lower than the navel height, right at about the belt level, deep and in. So that's the center of gravity. And the way things work is that on a physical level, is that an object is stable if it has a wide base of support. So the most stable objects are essentially triangles. This one is very stable because it has a much wider base of support than it has a height. So an equilateral triangle is a very stable object because the center of gravity is sitting over the center of the base of support. When we get to a triangle like an equilateral triangle, oops, how do I do this here? Like so, is very stable. The center line is over the base of support. But when we get to one side here, and we've got a triangle, what's that called? A right angle triangle, where we've got a right angle here with the base of support, then we've got less stability because the center of gravity is off to one side of the base of support. And then when we get an isosceles triangle, or is it scalene triangle, we now have a triangle that's tip is off the base of support. And if it goes far enough, it will actually fall over. So if that's the condition, then we need a lot of physical tension, a lot of muscular tension to hold us up. So when we start to relax that muscular tension, things come back to the right angle triangle and then to the equilateral triangle. Now, that process of centering has to do directly with the calming. The calming has directly to do with the paying attention to the breath. So you see what I mean by the sequence here. The breath engenders the calm, and the calm, by the relaxation of the musculature, brings us to center. And when we're aligned with the center, with the center of gravity, the line of the center of gravity, and we're relaxing, the weight tends to press down, and it brings us down into our center of gravity, and it also brings us more and more into the root of the structure. So when we center, we not only bring things down to the center of gravity, but there's a tendency, if everything starts to relax, for example, soles of the feet relax, ankles, soles of the feet relax, ankles, knees, hips relax. If that all relaxes, we tend to sink down into the structure. The structure is more and more stable because we've experienced this centering, and this takes us into the root. What I mean by root is we feel the weight of the upper body pressing down through into the legs, especially into the quadriceps, into the thighs, and this presses down into the base of the feet. So a good habit to develop when we're doing breath, calm, center, root, a good habit to develop is that we relax the soles of the feet and we relax the ankles, the knees, and the hips as well. So when I'm doing this practice, I'm thinking breath, calm. Calm means muscles relax. Center means I start to sink into the center of gravity along the line of gravity. And then I start to find root. And this is a good place to think soles of the feet relax, ankles, knees, hips relax. When the muscles around those joints relax, and again, this is part of the calm process. We're calming those muscles, settling those muscles. But when the muscles around those joints relax, when the hip, knee, and ankle relax, the soles of the feet relax, then we feel the weight of the upper body pressing down. And the soles of the feet feel like they're being kind of smushed, if that's a word, smushed into the ground. Now, this produces a certain kind of stability. When we're down here, and let's try this. Breath, calm, center, root. So we'll try a few breaths. Try 3 breaths. Breath, calm. Keep breathing as in a wave. Keep breathing in and paying attention to the breath. But notice this calming taking place. And the calm is leading us to center. And the center is bringing us into the root. So breath, calm, center, root. And as we do this, we keep repeating the breath, calm equation. So it's breath, calm, center, root. Breath, calm, center, breath, calm, center, root. And we find ourselves lower and lower into the stance and into this relationship with the ground. Now, one of the things that occurs here when we're centered and rooted into the ground is the pressure of this starts to well up. The fact that I'm down and in the ground and that everything's sinking down there starts to well up. Just like if you pour water into a vessel, the level of the water rises. So you're pouring the water and the water's going down and it's flowing down to the bottom of the vessel, but the water level rises. So what we're doing here is engendering energy. If we're able to do this, if we're able to get to breath, calm, center, root, and we're able to stay relaxed, things start to spontaneously want to move. And when they're moving, when they're being kind of stirred up or agitated here by that pressure, they start to move up through the process which is sending energy down. So you've got energy welling up and rising, but we're still doing breath, calm, center, down. This could be likened to precipitation. So where you've got water that's evaporating, maybe it's rained, but the sun has come out, and the sun is heating up the ground, and the water is beginning to evaporate. But up in the sky, it's still cool, so it's beginning to rain again. So you can have this condition where the rain is falling, the water condenses up in the cold, and it starts to fall through the evaporating water which is rising. Now, this is a completely natural process that's going on all the time. And there's no stiffness, there's no rigidity, there's no holding. Because there's no forces, there's no autocratic forces in nature telling things what to do and where to go. This natural, spontaneous flow is what we want to achieve by breath, calm, center, root, energy. Now, this energetic quality is expressed as movement. So sometimes usually I will say breath, calm, center, energy, or breath, calm, center, root, energy, or movement, in parenthesis. But there is no real movement of energy without movement. And there is no movement without energy. So all movement needs to be energized somehow, and all expression of energy is expressed through some form of movement. So we can say movement or energy. And this is very important because this is what we're talking about when we talk about Tai Chi being an energy art, or it's an art of movement, but it's also an art of energy. So how do those two things come together? Well, we've just seen it. So movement is energy, energy is movement, and it doesn't really matter the words we give to that. Breath, calm, center, root, energy. Now I'll just say one more thing about this, and that is that as energy starts to build up or starts to rise, as movement starts to occur, it's very easy for the mind to get very involved in that part of the process and forget the early part, which is the breath calm part. So we can initiate the process in a wonderful way with breath and calm, find center, root, energy starts, and then we get so caught up in the energy that we forget the breath calm. So when we're doing 5 words of self-composure, what we would want to do, what we would want to accomplish is that precipitation model. That's happening at the same time. As energy starts to spontaneously rise, we can even let that be a reminder to come back to the breath calm part of that process. We don't lose the energy by doing that because we're continuing a process that creates that energy in the first place. So a little trick, let's say mental trick, psychological trick in this 5 words of self-composure practice is to let the movement of energy become a trigger for the process of conscious breath that leads to calm. As soon as I start to feel things moving, it's, right, breath calm, breath calm. And as that winds up producing movement, breath calm, breath calm. So that's a little trick in that practice. We think of the 5 words of self-composure essentially as a preparation for doing the Wuduan Jin. In fact, we wouldn't even number this. This is the preparation. 5 words of self-composure can be practiced as many times as you like. So you can just start the Wuduan Jin by standing and doing a little bit of breathing. And if you did 5 or 10 breaths, you'd be well into the process. So let me say one more thing about the 5 words of self-composure. You can use the 5 words of self-composure for literally any practice. I mean any practice. So for example, if you're doing your solo form, instead of just going into the movements directly, you can start with 5 words of self-composure. If I want to, for example, I play the guitar, and when I'm playing the guitar, all of these same tendencies come up. The tendency for the shoulders to go up, for there to be a lot of concentration on one part and not the others. And if I start my guitar practice, I'm just sitting with my instrument, and I spend a little time with breath, calm, center, root, energy, then I start to find myself playing from that place. And it's a very different experience, and it probably sounds different too to somebody listening. So this is something that could be used in another context. Maybe you're a student and you're studying, and of course, it's sometimes hard to get into the study mode. There's all these different things going on, especially if your study involves a computer and there's 500 other, impulses, or there's 500 other pieces of information coming in to distract you from your studies. Sometimes it's good to really set yourself around your study with the 5 words of self-composure. Maybe you're dealing with somebody who's not being that pleasant, or somebody that for whatever reason, that person pushes your buttons, that person grinds your gears, and you're always finding yourself feeling a little bit irritated, and you're just trying to not let that show on your face. The person says something, and you're even just trying not to dilate your pupils. Well, it's possible to breath calm, center root energy. It's possible to do the 5 words of self-composure. Note the self-composure part while you're listening to somebody. It doesn't mean that we can only do this and not do something else. I find that quite regularly when I'm talking with a person that's a little bit, they're coming across as a bit thick to me. I'm thinking like, come on, can we move this on? So that's a good chance for me to do a little breath calm center. It's better for the relationship with that other person because I don't start to give off signals and vibes. I keep it calm, and it's better for me because I don't get so wound up. So the uses for breath calm center root energy are endless. You can find this take this as a tool for almost anything. So we'll leave that there for the moment, but we'll assume that we've started our practice here with breath calm center. Now where we go next is into the first section, and the first section is called the spine. And this section has 5 parts to it. The first one has to do with rolling, the second to do with swaying, the third with squatting, the fourth is unrolling, and the fifth is to do with the eyes. So we're going to look through these 5 stages here. And the first part of it, the rolling, which is rolling in the spine, what I'd like to suggest is that this can come very spontaneously out of your 5 words of self-composure. Here's the trick. When we do the 5 words of self-composure and we get to the calm part, there's a tendency for things to loosen up around the joints. So we've got, for example, the shoulders, that joint between the torso and the arm, that likes to move. When people start to relax, they start to do things with their neck, with their shoulder, like even the hips. When a person's loosening up to do something, they start to bend the knees a little bit, right? Shake out the hips a bit, move their shoulders around, move their neck around. And the place where a lot of buildup occurs is the neck. Now, I was telling you about my neck surgery, so maybe that's why I feel it so much there. But I think it's true with almost anyone that when people start to relax, they almost instinctively, automatically start loosening up their neck. So what I'd like to suggest is that there's 2 ways you can use the 5 words of self-composure in this regard. One is at the calm level. When you do breath calm and the muscles start relaxing, naturally movement can occur in the neck. The other is at the energy part. So when we've gone breath, calm, center, root, energy, and energy is moving up through the body, when that takes place, then the joints are the things that tend to express that movement. So you've got the sinking down, as I said, you get into root here. But as energy starts moving up through the body, what I feel my tailbone, my lower back, but I also feel my neck wants to move. So my neck could move because I've done breath calm, and as part of my calm, that starts to move. but it could also be breath, calm, root, energy, as energy wells up through my neck wants to move. And when we look at this just as an instruction, there's the tendency to think, again, in this kind of, as I said, autocratic way, section 1, the spine. Movement number 1, roll down, roll the neck, right? So I'm essentially telling the body to do that. What could be possibly beneficial, or maybe more effective, is to see if you can find your way into that neck rolling spontaneously through calm or through energy. So we have this first movement, or this first action, which is the neck rolling. So 5 words of self-composure, and I just start to feel it moving. And then I can just sculpt it a little bit from there. And what I'm doing is I'm rolling side to side. What do we mean by neck? We mean the space between the head and the shoulders. All the muscles in there. Letting them go side to side. And we could set up a count. We could say, do 5 times on each side, something like that. But we could also just say, feel it out. You find some, on one side it's a bit tighter than on the other side. My case right now, it's a bit tighter on the right side. And because I feel that, I can just kind of roll through there. The next thing we're going to do is the upper back. So we've got the neck. Let's see if we're okay here. So we've got the neck rolling here. And then the upper back is from the crest to the bottom of the hump. There tends to be a bit of a hump there, for some more so than others. And that part is the next part. We're going to kind of roll that hump. If you were a dinosaur, you'd have some bones sticking out of there, some spikes. So I'm just going side to side and allowing it to roll through. Now, the instruction is, neck, then upper back, but that whole neck area and the whole upper back area, the whole spine, is made up of these individual vertebrae. So we can roll in such a way that we massage a little bit each vertebrae, that we stretch out the muscles on either side of the vertebrae all the way down. So we're essentially in the neck area, but we can practice with a fair amount of nuance. Same when we're in the upper back area, we can go vertebrae by vertebrae here. So I'm at the top. And then a little bit further down. I'm sort of at the peak of that hump right now. So I'm going in the upper back, but I'm going down progressively. And then we get into the middle of the back. When we get to the middle of the back, there's a tendency in the first part with the neck, there's a tendency to sort of bow a little bit in the posture. Same with the upper back. There's a tendency to bow. But when we get to the middle of the back, something occurs, and that is that the weight of the upper back head starts to pull us forward. So now we're rolling in the middle part of the back. And when we're rolling in the middle of part of the back, we've got a new situation because there's traction on the back caused by the upper body and the head pitching forward. So before we were bowing, now we're on the edge of slumping. And when we roll through that or go side to side, we've got a bit of traction or pull from those upper elements. And that increases more when we get to the lower part of the middle of the back, and then we get to the lower back. And this is the area where most people feel the greatest tension, the neck and this small of the back area. Now, here we have to be a little careful. When we get to the lower back in that what's called the life gate or Mingmen area in traditional Chinese Neigong practices, when we get to that area, we've now got quite a lot of traction coming from the one side, and that's the weaker area and usually the more tense area. So we might, when we get to that lower back area, suddenly feel like it's a lot or maybe too much. So I want to say a couple things about how to handle that if it becomes too much. So when we get down there, we've gone neck, upper back, middle of the back, and now we're getting into that lower back, and we start to feel that stretch. It's not that we want to stand back up, but you might put your hands, let me tilt this a little bit. But in this case, and this is especially for example, seniors, because they've had a lifetime of working and not always treating their spines very well. When we get to that point and it's too much, that's where people can go like, too much. So you can bend your knees a little bit and put your hands on your knees, and then from there, wiggle the tailbone rather than sway into it. So I can sway into it. Probably most of you can sway into it and go through that area without too much trouble, right? And hang way down. So, but if that's too much, you can put the hands on the knees and then kind of move the hips around to stretch that area. And you see people do this anyways. You know, it's kind of like the typical image of an older gentleman walking along with his walking stick or his cane, and he gets to a certain point and he leans on the cane and goes, yeah, kind of like moves like that. The reason is because it's stretching out that lower back. In China, I saw many times, and this is an excellent exercise. People are practicing in the park, and they grab a hold of a fence, you know, a linked fence, chain link fence, or a fence or a post, and then they hold on to it, and then they lean back, holding onto it, and stretch that part of their body. They move it that way. So when we get to that part of the rolling downwards, we want to pay a little bit of attention. And likewise, as we go further, the fifth section in the roll down is the coccyx. So we're sinking down. We go here. And by this point, we've gone neck, upper back, middle of the back, and lower back. Here's where there might be a little bit of strain. And then when we get all the way down, if you're fairly flexible, your hands might be touching the floor. And then you kind of wiggle Let's see. Yeah. So you kind of wiggle a little bit your hips. And you're trying to move your coccyx. So the tailbone is pointing outwards. And it's like a dog's tail. You want to kind of move it, almost like it's independent. And that'll cause you to twist a little bit in your legs. And then you go side to side there, however many times. Now that movement from top to bottom, you can stop at any of those areas and play around depending on what you feel. But as a form, you more or less do it continuously. So starting, you've got breath, calm center, root energy. And if you get that feeling in your neck, it starts to unwind naturally. And you feel as you get to the bottom of the neck area, just spontaneously it finds its way into the upper back. If you want to emphasize, you can let the shoulders get involved as well, like a bit of rolling. Down you go, vertebrae by vertebrae, to the middle of the back. And here's where we start to feel some traction, some pulling, especially the middle of the back. I like to let my arms dangle here, even turn them a little bit like this. Let some energy out the fingers. Now we get into that more sensitive lower back area. As I say, you could put your hands or your elbows on your knees, and you could shake, shake, shake. Down we go. And then when we get to the bottom, moving the tailbone, moving the coccyx as independently as possible. Now notice when I do that, that starts me wanting to sway a little bit side to side. So what I'm going to do now from here is shift my weight onto one leg. And now we're focusing on the stretch in the middle of the back of the weighted leg. Come to the center, then off to the side again, and feel the stretch up the middle of the back of the weighted leg. And normally I would do that maybe 3 times, something like that. So we'll watch it from the back again. Let's see, I want to make sure you can see me here. So I'm forward here, and the stretch is really coming up the center of the back of the leg in the quadriceps. So when I switch over, when I shift over to this left leg, that's where I feel the stretch. Now, I can also play a little bit by bending my left knee. When I bend, I move that stretch around a little bit in the back of the leg. Come to the center, off to this side, same thing. I'm in this leg, I bend it a little bit, really from the ankle and then the knee, and I feel that stretch amplifying. From here now, I point the toes inward, as close to touching toes as you can get. Can you see that? I can't see what you can see. I'm sure you can see that. Yeah. And then from here, I again shift my weight to one leg, and now I feel the stretch a little more to the inside of the weighted leg. So my weight is on this left leg, and the stretch is coming more up here. Come to the center, and then off to the right. And then you feel that stretch up the inside of the back of the weighted leg. And again, I would do that 3 times or so. When I'm doing these movements from one side to the other, right now I'm on the left and then I'm going to go to the right, I don't just leap over to that side. I settle to the center first and then from there come out into that leg. Now, having done, 3 or so of these on each side, up to you, toes are forward, and then I bring the heels in so that essentially my toes are pointed outwards, but my toes are pointed outwards because I brought my heels in. Now my weight is going on to the left leg again, and I feel the stretch on the outside of the back of the weighted leg. Right from here and out. Then to the center. Then to the other side. When I'm on this right leg, my right leg is quite straight, but I let my left knee bend a bit. So once again, the stretch is on the outside of the back of the weighted leg. Now from here, I'm in the center. I come back with the toes pointed forward. And that completes the second part of this stretch. From here now, I turn the toes outwards and I squat. Now, not everybody's able to do this squat, but we'll just look at it first as if we are able to do it. What we want to do when we get into the squat, let's see, I'll stand here. Yeah, so come down here, turn the toes out. What we want to do when we're into the squat here is we want to just gently bring our hands together and use the hands pressing together and the elbows pushing on the knees to open up the groin. So kind of like you're praying for more flexibility here. When you've got the knees pushed out in this way, you can twist a little bit side to side to open up the groin. From this place, you can release, stand up a little bit, bring the feet together, or bring the feet forward. Now, not everybody can do this, this stretch, can do this squat. So let's say, for example, when I was down in this part here where I got to the lower back, and I realized, I can't hang there, that's too much for my back. We'll just say that we're dealing with a situation where the lower back isn't open enough to go down, and also the groin is not open enough to do the squat. And very often those two things go hand in hand. So if the groin is not open enough, often the lower back develops tension. Or if the lower back has tension, because of a lack of movement, the groin starts to become rigid as well. So those are actually two separate issues, but for the moment, I'm going to treat them as if we're talking about one issue here. So lower back and groin inflexibility. So let's say we want to make progress doing this exercise, but we're not there yet. So I've gone heads rolling down, upper back, middle of the back, and I get to this lower back where there's quite a lot of traction coming from the hanging upper body. And that's where I put my hands on my knees and or my elbows on my knees. And then from there, I start to work a little bit the lower back. Well, the same thing. If I'm here and I can't really lay down and stretch down like this, I can keep my knees a little bent. I can keep my elbows on my knees, and then when I go on to the one side, I just get a modified stretch. When I bring the toes in here, I just work with a little bit modified stretch. I don't have to go that far down. You might find that you can't quite get all the way down when you're bending, but then when you go to open the legs here, you can go a little bit further down. It just depends on your condition, or you might have to stand up a bit to do these. See, maybe you do this one, you can't turn the toes in too much. So some of you, maybe you've got seniors that are in their 70s and 80s that haven't been as diligent with their bodies as you have, because some of you are in that age class too and can do these things fine. See, you get to hear, just do it more standing up. Maybe the person can't do it all the way down. And then with the squat, so when we've done this here, same thing. They can do the squat up here. That might even be too much for some people, so then it's hands on the knees, trying to do it up here. And any work in that range is good for the person. So you only want to work to what your flexibility allows you. Give me 1 sec, I'm going to get some tea. So many of you are teachers, and a piece of advice is always push the students to improving their capabilities, but they have to go from where they are. So let's say we've got a range of 0 to 10, no flexibility to full flexibility. And some of your students they're up there around 7, they're at 70% of their flexibility. Then you want them to be working towards 71%, 72%, 73%. But some of your students are at 40% of their flexibility. You don't want to try to push them to 50 or 60. You want them to go from 40 to 41 to 42 to 43 and let them get where they get from where they are. So this is very, very important. And sometimes students feel in the class peer pressure because they see a lot of the other students have more flexibility than they have. And so they feel badly about that. They feel badly about themselves. And then instead of handling that with good spirit and good cheer, they quit because they just feel like it's too much for them. So it's very important to do this progressively, just do it according to your capabilities and finding little modifications where necessary. Now before we go into the next one, because this relates to it as well, some people have problems with things like blood pressure. Some people get dizzy when they bend forward. Some people have had heart problems, have a history of heart problems. So you want to also be mindful of the fact not only of flexibility, but that some people when they bend forward, they can feel woozy. They could pass out. They could actually faint. So if we're rolling down here, I've never experienced that the neck rolling is an issue in that regard. You get down to here, that's usually in the realm of most people, even people who've had heart surgery. But then when you start to this point, do you remember I said now you've got traction pulling you forward? So if you've got this feeling of being pulled forward as you're bending, that's where some people can start to feel woozy. They can start to feel hyperoxygenated and might have to actually sit down. So, and you get all the way down to here and it's just simply not possible. So you have to be mindful of those people, and in that case, you just don't go there at all. So you have them work only up to here, maybe just into the middle of the back, but not to the point where they're really stooped forward, and don't have them hanging upside down. Now, as far as the stretching the groin goes, the backs of the legs and the groin goes, so stretching the back of the leg is the side-to-side stuff, and stretching the groin is the squat. So you can still have people do that in a standing position just by putting their feet a little wider. So if we step with the feet a little more apart, oops, let me see here. So the feet are a little bit more apart. They can do that same thing, just stretching like that. It's not as deep, it's not as accurate, but it still works. And then you can get them to turn the foot in, and then they put their weight on that leg. Okay? It's just one at a time. And then they can go here and then stand on that one. So you want to turn the foot that you want to stretch and then straighten it and put your weight on it a bit. Okay? Turn the foot you want to stretch, straighten that leg, and put your weight on it. It's a little bit of an adaptation. And then people can squat from here too. They don't have to be all the way down. They don't have to break that center line. They can just go from here, turn the toes out, and just do a little bit like this. Okay. And there's lots of groin flexibility practice that you can get in there as well. So these are ways to modify that. Now in the exercise, we've gone down the 5 stages of the back, the stretches, the side to side, the squat. And now when we're coming up, instead of coming up rolling side to side, we're just going to roll through the lower back, the coccyx, the lower back, middle of the back, upper back, and neck. And we can just roll slowly, but up in a straight line. It's not necessary on the way up to go side to side. Go side to side. Excuse me. Pardon me. It's not necessary to go side to side on the way up. Really what we're doing here is we're integrating the spinal column with the hips, the groin flexibility and all of that. And we want to come up unified. So here's the idea. When I start 5 words of self-composure and I start to get some movement going, and that culminates in this neck movement. And when I do that, I'm starting to open up all of the structure that I want to integrate. So maybe I get that upper, lower, middle, and lower of the spine. And I get the legs, the hips, the legs. I get that all connected to the groin, everything here. So when I come up, it's as if I want to say, or as if I want a quality that everything that I did down here, in the ankles, knees, hips, groin, all of that is now coming up together, up through the spine, and I'm now unified. You see? So if you come up and you're swaying again, you've re-isolated those parts. So here, this is isolated stretching, isolated stretching, isolated stretching. Here, these are all isolated stretches. The squat isolates this whole region. But when we come up, we want to, in a sense, gather this entire structure that we've opened up and have it come together as one unified structure. So the rolling up is quite important. And when you roll up, it's to kind of gather everything together. And for the last part of the exercise, which is called 5-direction looking, and what we're intending here is to unify the spinal column, which itself has been unified with the legs, and we want to integrate the spinal column with the brain. You know, the center of the spinal column, the nervous system, it all comes out at the brain, or it comes, depending on how you look at it, comes out of the brain and into the spinal column. So it's very difficult to find a way to hook up, let's say, or connect or unify the spinal column with the brain. Just looking at our time here, we're doing pretty good. And so the way we do this is with 5-direction looking. The 5-direction looking is to control the movement of the eyes and essentially activate the retina, which itself is directly connected to the brain. So what we're doing is we're energetically bringing things up through the spine into the eyes, and then we're activating the eyes, and in that way connecting with the brain. This is the idea. So if you practice with that idea, you get a bit of a different experience than simply doing the movements. 5-direction looking means, as I've rolled up here, come up to here, everything's coming here. My eyes are probably quite relaxed at this point, but we let the sensation or feeling in the eyes be the culmination of the rolling up. So we're down, we integrated the stance with the lower back, up we come, and now we're standing up. And from here, everything is in a sense gathered in the eyes. And then from here, the eyes look up independently, like so. When we started this practice, we were, let's say, we started as a tense mess, just a mess of tensions and sort of habitual body structures. So we came into the process with all of this, and then we started breath, calm. Oh, that feels good. Breath, calm, center. Oh, yeah. Now breath, calm, center, root. Oh, now I'm down in there. Breath, calm, center, root, energy, movement. Oh, yeah, things are starting to move here. And so you can see we're breaking up that tense structure, causing it to move around a little bit, sort of like if you had a casserole pan that you were going to clean. You know, it's got all of this baked on stuff from whatever you were cooking, and then when you put it in the water, you start stirring it up, and it actually looks messier. And then you start little by little cleaning up each area, and then that's how you're cleaning your casserole dish well enough to put it back in the cupboard. So we've done this. We started with this messy energy. Through breath, calm, center, root, energy, we've got something moving. We've got some water, soapy water in the casserole dish. And then we start scrubbing a little bit. So this is scrubbing. So we're going, and we're doing the big stuff first. The spine is the big stuff. As we get down into the spine, we're down into the hips, the groin, all of this core stuff. And so when we come up, we've got a casserole dish that's quite a bit more, had a more detailed cleaning. And now we're going to do some final stuff here, and that's with the eyes. So the eyes, we gather at the top, and then we look up. And you look up, you don't want to strain your eyes, but you look up with some effort. Now when I'm looking up here, my idea, I don't want to do this with my neck. So the idea is that you come to this place and the eyes look up from there. There can be a little bit of movement of the head, but we don't want to overdo that. Then we look to one side. I tend to look to the left. Same thing. It's okay if the head follows a little bit, but this isn't really about a head movement. We've already worked the neck out here. So we go up, then to the corner, then we look down, then we look to the corner, or to the side, I should say, and we look back up. So that's 4. So once again, we look up, side, down, side, up, and then come to the center. From here now, I look out. I look out as if I'm standing over a vista. Let's say, for example, I was standing on my balcony, let's say, and you've got the balcony railing here, and then you've got some trees in the yard, and then you've got the field across the way, and then you've got some more trees beyond that, and then beyond that you've got the kind of the clouds and, you know, a distance, some mountains in the distance, let's say. So what we want to do when we look out is just progressively look out from this quite contained space to looking out, you know, around the distance where another person would be if you were talking with them. And then to look a little further. And then a little further to where where these trees might be. In my case, it's a music stand that has my notes on it. And then I'm looking a little further to some boxes. And then I'm looking a little further to a wall. And then I could continue and look further. If I was facing out my window here, I might be looking at the trees out there, and then the trees across the way, etc., etc. And then we come back in, step by step as well. We got as far as looking way at the mountains, and now we're back to a nearby hill. And then now we're at the tree that's closer to us. And now we're at the rail, the balcony, or the windowsill. And now we're a little closer to where somebody might be standing. And now we're back comfortably again. And then we do the 5-direction looking again. We go up to the right, going in the other direction, down, to the left, up, and then center. Now, it's okay if you want to, if that's feeling good, because sometimes this can feel quite good on your eyes, by the way. If you do a lot of computer work, for example. So if you're practicing, if you're working a lot on the computer and your eyes are in this focused, you get that eye strain. And we mediate so much of our lives through screens now these days, so many people. So there's the computer, and then let's take a break and go watch something on a screen, right? And even driving cars now, people have these little screens that they look at. So we're often, going square-eyed, and it can be nice just to move the eyes. And as I'm doing that, I might feel like, oh, I'd like to do that a few times. So here, yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, just take a break. Oh, that's good. Let my eyes relax. Whew, I could do one more round. Do it a bit softer. So you can do several times around. It doesn't have to be just one time. And when you do the looking out at a distance, take your time and observe the details of a thing. So if I'm looking at, there's my bookcase there. Oh, which books are on that shelf? Which books are in that part of my bookshelf? So you can take a moment and kind of reflect and ponder with what you're seeing. And then come back and then do the circle in the other direction. You can do it also when you get very comfortable with this. Instead of doing it in such a linear fashion, you can be looking up and to the side, to down like this. But you can have it be a bit more circular, like it's a bit more continuous, right? As an exercise. But try to keep the eyes going in the same direction. Don't have one eye going in one direction and one eye going in the other direction. Ha ha ha.